Montana Territory, spring of 1873, the snow was still melting in patches across the Bitterroot Range when the cowboy first heard her voice. Quinn O'Malley had not intended to stop in Phillipsburg. He was just passing through with his packhorse and his grief, heading nowhere in particular. His wife had been gone for 4 years, but the ache stayed fresh beneath his ribs. He did not talk about her much anymore. Folks in town stopped asking after a while. But he remembered her voice, strong and soft at once, the way it filled up the cabin on cold nights, how it steadied him after long days working cattle. That was why he pulled up his horse outside the saloon when he heard the singing. The voice came from inside a woman's, clear and trembling on the edges, like she was trying to hold herself steady. Quinn stepped through the batwing doors, boots crunching on dirt and broken glass. She was standing on a makeshift platform of crates, brown hair messy, cheeks bruised, lips split. She sang low, her arms pressed tight to her sides like she was trying not to shake. No one clapped, most just watched. Some laughed. A man near the back, tall, red-faced, wearing a deputy's tin star, leaned against the bar with a sneer. "Told you I'd break that mouth of yours if you kept it up." She finished the song. Her eyes scanned the room, but she did not look afraid, just tired. Quinn walked up slow and set a coin on the bar. "Let her down," he said. The deputy turned. "What's it to you?" "Nothing," Quinn said. "Except I do not like men who hit women." The deputy snorted. "She is my sister. She mouths off, I handle it." Quinn's voice dropped lower. "You beat her for singing." The deputy stepped forward, hand on his belt. "You want to die in this town, stranger?" Quinn was not a man who moved fast unless he had to, but when he did not miss. His fist caught the deputy under the chin, one clean punch, and the man went down hard. The saloon went quiet. The woman on the crates stared down at him, eyes wide. "Come on," Quinn said without looking at her. "You are done singing for them." She hesitated, then stepped down. Her ankle gave a little. Quinn caught her arm. She winced but did not pull away. They left before the deputy stirred. Outside, the wind was sharp. She wrapped her arms around herself, but not from cold. "Thank you," she said, "but you should go. He will come after you." "So let him," Quinn said. She glanced at him. "Why did you do that?" He looked at her face. "My late wife sang too," he said. "And she saved me." They stood in silence for a moment, the sun fading low behind the mountains. "I'm Quinn," he said. "Celia," she replied. "Celia Fraser," he nodded. "Do you have somewhere to go?" Celia looked away. "Not anymore," he gestured to his horse. "Then come with me." "I am headed west. You can ride with me until you figure what comes next." She hesitated again, then nodded once. They rode out of Phillipsburg without looking back. By nightfall, they made camp near a creek. Quinn built the fire while Celia sat on a fallen log, holding her hands close to the flames. Her lip had split again where the bruising curved down her chin. "You should let me clean that," Quinn said, pulling a cloth from his saddlebags. "I have had worse," Celia muttered. "I know," he said gently, "but you do not have to anymore." She looked at him strange, like she did not understand the words. He soaked the cloth and knelt in front of her. She let him dab at the blood, flinching once but not moving away. After, she stared into the flames. "I used to sing to my children," she said quietly. "Before they were taken." Quinn froze. "Children?" She nodded, her eyes dry but flat. "Two, Nathaniel and Nora. The blacksmith's wife in Phillipsburg told the law I was unfit. My brother helped. They said I was mad from grief and wandering. That I sang too much. I ain't seen them in over a year." Quinn's jaw tightened. "Where are they?" "Helena," she said. "That is where the court sent them." Then her voice cracked. "I need to get them back. I just do not know how." Quinn sat beside her. "Then we will go to Helena." Celia looked at him. "Why would you help me?" He stared at the fire, remembering a voice that used to sing to him in the dark. "Because once someone saved me too." She said nothing, but her hand moved close to his on the log. She did not touch him, not quite, but it was close enough. They traveled slow the next few days. Celia sang sometimes as they rode, not loud, but enough to stir something soft in Quinn's chest. Her voice was raw from healing, but there was something steady in it now. At night, they sat close by the fire. She told him about her babies, how Nathaniel hated the cold, how Nora liked to press her ear to the piano when she played. Quinn told her about his wife, how she sang while chopping wood, how she taught him to dance in the dirt behind their house. Celia smiled at that. "Your wife sounds like she was a good woman." "She was," he said, "but she is gone, and I have been alone a long time." Celia looked at him, her eyes soft but tired. "So have I." They reached Helena by the end of the week. Quinn found the orphanage, a squat brick building near the edge of town. Celia waited outside, her hands twisting in her skirt. He went in first. The matron was a sharp-shouldered woman with tight hair. "We do not just release children to anyone who walks in." "I am not anyone," Celia said, stepping in behind him. "I am their mother." The woman narrowed her eyes. "You were declared unfit." "That was a lie," Quinn said, "and I am willing to testify to it." It took hours, signatures, questions. Quinn spoke carefully. He told them about the bruises, the deputy, the way Celia had been held against her will. He used his voice like his wife once had, calm, honest, steady. By nightfall, the children were brought out from a back room. Nathaniel was 7. Nora, 5. They ran to Celia with open arms, crying into her dress. Quinn stood back and let her hold them. Later, outside, Celia turned to him, her face wet but glowing. "I do not know how to thank you." "You do not have to," Quinn said. She stepped closer. "You gave me back everything." He shook his head. "You did that. I just helped." She looked at him a long moment. Then she kissed him slow, sure, no hesitating. And Quinn kissed her back because something in him had come back to life, and it was her voice that did it. They did not say anything after. But her hand stayed in his as they walked back to the inn, and her children followed close behind, safe and held. The wind in Helena carried the smell of thawed earth and distant pine, and by morning the children were still asleep, bundled together on the inn's narrow bed. Quinn stood by the window, watching the slow stir of wagons outside. Celia was at the washbasin, wringing water from a cloth and wiping the last of the dirt from Nora's cheek. "She kicks in her sleep," she murmured. "Nathaniel does too," Quinn said quietly. "Caught my shins sometime after midnight." Celia folded the cloth and set it on the sill. "They aren't used to sharing space anymore. That's something we'll have to ease them back into." He turned from the window. "You have plans for where to go next?" She hesitated, then nodded. "There's a parcel of land near Deer Lodge, belonged to my late husband's uncle. We stayed there for a time after the war before it all turned. Cabin's likely in ruin, but the deed's still mine." "You'll ride there, with care," she said. "Nora's not strong yet. She got sick last winter. I'll have to make the journey gentle." Quinn stepped nearer. "You'll need another set of hands. That place is likely overgrown, and winter didn't do it any favors." She looked up. "You saying you'll come?" "I'm saying I've got nowhere else that needs me more." Her eyes stayed on his a moment longer, then she nodded once, not quick or shy, but sure. "We leave at dawn." The ride to Deer Lodge took 3 days. They stopped often, letting the children stretch and drink from creeks. Quinn carried Nora more than once when her legs tired. Celia watched him quietly when he did, saying nothing but pulling her shawl tighter around herself. The cabin stood crooked among tangled brush and wind-bent trees. The door hung loose on its frame. A family of birds burst from the rafters when Quinn pushed it open. Celia stepped inside and let out a breath that shook her shoulders. Figured it would be worse. He ran a hand along the hearth. "Still solid, got bones worth keeping." That night they slept on bedrolls by the fire after sweeping out the worst of the dust. Celia laid between her children, one hand resting lightly on Nora's hip. Quinn sat near the flames, whittling a branch down to a spindle. "You worked timber?" she asked softly. "Some. Before cattle work, my father was a cooper." "Barrels," he nodded. "He made one for my wife the day we married. For flour, she kept lavender in the bottom." Celia didn't answer at first. Then she said, "My husband planted wildflowers around the porch, said they'd keep the bees nearby. We never got to harvest a drop of honey." Quinn paused his carving. "What was his name?" "Elias." Her voice held no tremble, just memory. "He died in a flash flood outside Missoula." "Took 2 mules and the cart." He set down the spindle. "I'm sorry. I was angry for years," she said. Not at him, just at what was left behind. The fire cracked. Outside, the wind began to pick up, brushing through the eaves with a hollow sound. "I don't dream about her anymore," Quinn said. "Not in the way I used to. She's quieter now. Like she's watching, not calling." Celia's gaze didn't leave the fire. Maybe that's peace, he nodded slowly. Maybe it is. Over the next weeks, the land changed under their hands. Quinn cleared the fallen pine near the fence line. Celia patched the roof with old shingles salvaged from the shed. Nathaniel carried stones from the creek bed to line a garden plot. Nora sat in the sun and hummed to herself while winding bits of grass around her fingers. Celia never raised her voice. She taught her son to hold a hammer with both hands, showed her daughter how to tell time from mint by the smell. In the evenings, she sang soft tunes while kneading dough, her voice low and even. One night after the children had gone quiet, Quinn handed her a tin cup of coffee and sat beside her on the porch steps. The moon was near full, silvering the trees and casting long shadows across the field. "You ever think about staying?" she asked. "I do," he said. "I mean here." "With us?" He turned the cup in his hands. "I'd only stay if I was wanted, Celia." She looked at him then, and for the first time since they met, there was no hesitation in her face. "You are." He reached out, brushing her knuckles with his fingertips. She didn't pull away. "I don't have much," he said. "No land, no name anyone remembers." "You've got hands that build," she said. "A voice that keeps steady, and you don't scare easy." He smiled, slow and quiet. "That's enough then. For me it is." She leaned into his shoulder and he let his arm curve around her back. They said nothing more that night, just sat until the stars brightened and the coffee turned cold. The next morning, Nathaniel followed Quinn out to the tool shed. "You gonna stay and marry my ma?" he asked plainly. Quinn paused, hand on the saw. "I'd like to," Nathaniel nodded. "Good, you carry Nora better than anyone." Quinn chuckled. "I'll take that as approval." By midsummer, the porch was rebuilt, the garden green with shoots, and the roof no longer leaked. Quinn stood beside Celia at sundown, watching the children chase fireflies near the tree line. "I never thought I'd get this back," she said softly. "You didn't get it back," he said. "You made it new." She turned to him, and this time she kissed him in full daylight with the sky wide above them and the air warm against their skin. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't shy. It was a promise, and he answered it with both hands on her waist, steady and certain. Inside, the fire crackled. Outside, the stars began to rise. And between them, in the quiet earned by long miles and healed wounds, two people who had once lost everything began again. The kitchen smelled of yeast and damp wood, and a light fog clung to the morning fields. Celia stood barefoot, pulling the last loaf from the Dutch oven, the crust dark and cracked just right along the top. Quinn came in from the barn, brushing hay from his sleeves, his cheeks ruddy from the cold that still clung to early autumn. He leaned his shoulder to the doorframe, watching her slice the loaf in long, careful strokes. "You always cut bread like it's something sacred." She set the blade down gently. "My mother taught me that bread carries more than weight. She said it remembers the hands that shaped it." He stepped closer, took a warm slice from the board and broke it in half. "Then this one remembers yours," he said, handing her the better piece. She accepted it with a glance that lingered. "You're early back from the barn." Horses were settled already, and Nathaniel's getting quicker with the rope. He's got good instincts. She rested her hip against the table. "He'd follow you through fire if you let him." "I wouldn't let him follow me anywhere I didn't trust to stand on." Celia chewed slowly, then said, "He asked me last night if I'd let you build a fence for his future cattle." Quinn blinked, then laughed under his breath. "Guess he's planning ahead." "He is," she said. "He's thinking about roots." Quinn's smile faded into something quieter. "You sure you want me part of that?" She looked him straight in the eye. "I wouldn't have let you stay if I wasn't." Outside, footsteps approached, small, quick ones. Nora pushed the door open with both hands. "Mama," she said, breathless, "there's a man at the edge of the field." Celia straightened. "Did he speak to you?" "No, just waiting. Has a pack mule." Quinn set his half of the bread down. "I'll look." She followed him out. The morning was still, the fog lifting in strips. At the far end of the fence line stood a man with a wide-brimmed hat and a coat patched along the sleeves. He didn't move as they approached. When they were close enough to see the red stitching on his collar, Celia stopped short. "His name's Asa," she said low. "He used to ride with my husband's regiment during the war." Quinn's shoulders tensed, but he said nothing. Asa tipped his hat. Didn't mean to startle the girl. What brings you here? Celia asked, her voice steady, came through Deer Lodge last week. Someone mentioned a woman with 2 young'uns fixing up the old McRee place. He looked past her at Quinn. Didn't expect to find company. Quinn didn't answer. He was watching the man's hands, which stayed loose at his sides. A sag cleared his throat. Elias wrote me years back. Said if anything happened to him, someone ought to check in on you. Took me longer than I like to admit, but I'm here. Celia folded her arms. That letter was written before I lost the children, before Phillipsburg. I know, Asa said. He didn't know how things would go. Just wanted someone to see you were safe if he couldn't, she glanced at Quinn. I am now. Asa looked between them, then nodded once. You've made a life. It's not finished yet, she said. He reached into his satchel and pulled out a folded square of paper yellow with age. He wanted you to have this. I held onto it too long. She took it slowly. Her hands didn't shake, but her fingers lingered on the paper's edge. He never wrote me before he died, she said. Wrote this 2 weeks before, Asa said. Didn't get a chance to send it. Quinn stepped back, giving her space. She didn't open the letter right away. Asa adjusted the strap on his shoulder. I won't stay. You came a long way, Quinn said. I did, Asa agreed, but this ain't my place. Not anymore. He touched the brim of his hat and turned back toward the trees. Celia didn't speak until his shape had vanished into the line of birch and pine. She opened the letter slowly, unfolding the creases one by one. Quinn waited, quiet. When she finished reading, she pressed the page to her chest. He asked me to sing to the children, said if he didn't make it, he hoped my voice would keep them brave. Quinn touched her arm. It did. She looked up at him, eyes clear but full. I want to show you something. He followed her inside, through the kitchen, and into the back room that had once been a storehouse. She'd cleared it out weeks ago, but the corners still held the scent of old apples and dust. Now a low bench stood beneath the window, and a small harmonium sat atop it, the bellows patched with careful stitching. She lifted the lid. It belonged to my grandmother. I found it in the loft behind the chimney. Quinn stepped closer, brushing his fingers over the worn keys. Does it still play? Not well, she said, but enough. She sat, pressing the foot pedal with slow rhythm. The notes came soft and uneven, but when she played a simple melody, the sound filled the space like something remembered. He stood behind her, listening. When she sang, her voice didn't tremble. It had changed since Phillipsburg, richer now, like soil turned for spring. She didn't glance back at him, didn't ask for approval. She just sang. When the song ended, she looked over her shoulder. I don't have to be quiet anymore. Quinn knelt beside her. No, you don't. Her hand found his, resting on the wooden edge of the instrument. Then I won't. He pressed his lips to her knuckles, slow and sure. Outside, Nora's laughter rose with the breeze, and Nathaniel's boots thudded across the porch as he raced a stick along the rails. The sky had cleared entirely, the fog burned off by sun. Inside, 2 people sat close, joined not by rescue or need, but by something built day by day, earned, steady, and growing. The trees along the creek behind the cabin had turned, their leaves flame-colored and brittle in the wind. Quinn stood knee-deep in the water, sleeves rolled and trousers soaked to the thigh. A small wooden box of trout sat on the bank, cooled beneath a wet cloth. He felt the shift in the air before he heard her boots on the stones. Celia stopped just short of the water's edge, her skirt gathered in one hand. You always fish without a line, he held up the willow branch spear. Only when I'm after supper quick. She tilted her head. What does it teach the children if they see you cheating the river? He grinned without turning. To eat well. She crouched beside the box, lifted the cloth, and ran her fingers along the silver bellies. Nathaniel's carving a spindle-legged table. He asked if you'd show him how to brace the joints. Quinn eased the spear from the water and stepped up the bank, water dripping from his boots. I'll go over it with him after we clean these. She didn't rise. He's been asking questions again. About Elias. Quinn set the spear against a tree and crouched beside her. What kind? Why he never wrote. Why he didn't build the house stronger if he knew we'd be alone someday. Quinn glanced toward the cabin, where a thin thread of smoke rose from the chimney. You answer him? I told him Elias did what he could, that there's no shame in being gone, only in being forgotten. Her voice caught a little. But Nathaniel's old enough now, he sees what's missing. Quinn said nothing for a while, then he reached for the cloth and covered the fish again. Let him see it, he'll grow stronger knowing what wasn't handed to him. Is that how you learned? She asked. My father stayed long enough to teach me how to split cedar. He left before I learned why men sometimes don't stay. She looked at him sideways. And your mother got sick the spring I turned 15. I buried her under a juniper tree in Kansas. Never saw my father again after that. He stood, brushing his hands. But I stayed put long enough to see what kind of man I didn't want to be. Celia rose too, brushing dirt from her palms. And what kind do you want to be? He looked at her then, quiet and steady. The kind that doesn't leave when the cold sets in. They walked back together, the trout swinging in a burlap sack between them. Nora sat on the porch steps, a row of dry leaves strung on a length of twine in her lap. She held it up as they passed. Banner for the garden, she said. Quinn nodded. It'll scare off the worst of the birds. Not the red ones, she said. I like those. Celia paused to kiss the top of her daughter's head. Then we'll let them stay. Inside, Nathaniel was bent over the table frame, tongue pressed to his lip, pencil tucked behind his ear. Quinn set the sack on the counter and leaned over the boy's shoulder. Your corner's off, he said. See here, he tapped the joint. You're cutting in too shallow, Nathaniel frowned. I measured it twice. Quinn reached for the square. Then measure it again, you'll know it's right when it doesn't wobble. Celia stirred the fire under the stove, her back to them. He hates being wrong. So did I, Quinn said, glancing at her, till I realized it's how you learn to be right. That night, after the children were asleep and the sky had folded into deep velvet, Quinn stepped into the main room and found Celia standing near the hearth. She held a folded scrap of linen in her hands, her fingers moving slow across the stitches. I had a dream last night, she said without turning. I was back in the saloon, but this time I wasn't singing. I was sweeping the floor. He crossed to her and waited. I don't know why that felt worse, she said, but it did. He touched her shoulder, warm and solid. Because you were made for more than silence. She looked up at him. I used to think singing was just a thing I did, for the children, for comfort. But now I miss it for myself. He reached into the pocket of his vest and pulled out a small paper-bound book. Found this in town last week. Trader had it tucked behind some seed catalogs. She took it carefully. Hymns, mostly, some folk ballads. A few things I didn't recognize. She opened it, running her thumb along the dog-eared pages. You want me to sing again? I want you to remember who you are, even when no one's listening. She pressed the book to her chest, then looked at him. I'm not scared of being heard anymore. He stepped closer. Good, she rested her forehead lightly against his. Do you ever feel guilty that we're standing here and they're not? His hand cupped the back of her neck. I used to. But grief is a place to pass through, not live in. Her breath caught, but she nodded. I want to marry you. He pulled back enough to see her eyes. Say that again. I want to marry you, Quinn O'Malley, not because you saved me, not because of what we've lost, but because I want to build a life with you that doesn't have to heal from anything. He didn't kiss her, not yet. Instead, he took both her hands and held them against his chest over the place that still ached sometimes. Then let's do it, with your children beside us, with the garden in bloom. And with your voice carrying through these walls. This time when she kissed him, it was slow and certain, the kind of kiss that didn't chase away the past but made space for it. Outside, the leaves whispered against the roof, and the first frost of the season crept across the fields. But inside, everything was warm hands, fire, hearts, and the quiet between them was full of promise. The first snow came early that year. It dusted the rafters before the roof was fully tarred and settled in the seams of the pasture fence before Quinn could finish the east line. But the cabin held firm and the hearthstone stayed warm. That morning, steam curled from the eaves as Celia boiled laundry in the yard, her hands red from lye and wind. Nathaniel stood beside her, turning the wringer with both arms. Horse tracks out past the orchard, he said. Celia glanced up. That's so, he nodded. Just one set, hoofs chipped, looked fresh. She dried her wrists on her apron. Let's have Quinn look, might be a stray from town. Quinn came around the side of the barn not long after, a coil of rope over his shoulder. When Nathaniel pointed him toward the orchard, he didn't answer right away, just stepped into his boots and followed the boy's tracks back through the snow. Celia stayed behind, scrubbing the last shirt in silence. Her mind didn't jump to danger, not anymore, but it did catch on the thought of someone watching. The orchard was quiet. Nothing stirred but the wind scattering dry branches across the frozen ground. When Quinn returned, his hair damp from the snowmelt, he leaned a hand on the doorframe. "Not a stray," she looked up. "Someone let a horse in," he said, stopped at the edge of the tree line, then turned back, didn't cross the fence. She dried her hands. "You think it's someone we know?" "I think it's someone watching close enough to know what not to do." She tied the apron behind her back, tighter than needed. "We've got nothing left to steal." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Could be news passed down from Phillipsburg. Or someone your brother knew." She didn't flinch. "Then let them come see what kind of folk we are now." That evening, Quinn brought in the rifle and set it near the door, not for fear but for readiness. Nathaniel watched his hands as he checked the chamber. "Do you think they'll come back?" the boy asked. Quinn nodded once. "If they do, they'll find a fence and a fire and a man who stands between." Nathaniel's shoulders straightened at that, and he didn't ask again. The next day brought no tracks, nor the next. By the time the week passed, the snow had crusted hard enough for the children to walk atop it without sinking. Celia stood at the window while Nora chased a wool-stuffed ball across the yard, her laughter carrying through the glass. "I want to have the vows before winter sets deep," she said. Quinn looked up from the length of hide he was shaping into reins. "We'll need a preacher." "Reverend Fitch rides out from Warm Springs every other month," she said. "He married Elias and me, but he's never one to dwell on the past." Quinn dipped his head. "Then we'll ask him." She crossed to the table where he sat and laid a palm flat beside the hide. "I want it here in the field, where the apple trees bloom come spring." He turned his hand over, threading his fingers through hers. "You'll have it just that way." The morning Reverend Fitch arrived, the snow had softened under a sudden thaw. Celia wore a dress dyed with walnut husks, its sleeves narrowed to the wrist and the hem brushed clean. Nora carried a posy of dried lavender and pine needles, and Nathaniel held the ring Elias's old band, now polished and fitted for Quinn's hand. The words were spoken with no audience but the trees and the sky and the children, who stood close enough to hear every syllable. "I will keep your name safe," Quinn said, voice low, "and the house we build will never close its doors to you." Celia answered without pause, "I will not hide my voice again. I will meet every season with you from frost to bloom." The Reverend blessed their hands and left not long after, his horse kicking up flecks of slush on the road. Inside, they ate bread thick with honey, and Nora placed the lavender bundle above the mantel. That night, Celia slipped off her shoes beside the bed and folded herself against Quinn's side, her breath warm at his collarbone. "You're more than I thought I'd have again," she whispered. He pressed his cheek to her hair. "You're the only thing I never expected but always wanted." They didn't put out the fire until the embers faded to red. Years passed. The orchard bloomed the spring after their vows, and again each year after. Nathaniel took to the saddle with ease and grew tall before 20. He built his own barn behind the south field and filled it with a pair of chestnut mares. Nora learned to read the stars first, then the clouds. She stitched her own dresses by 15 and played the harmonium so well the Reverend asked her to lead hymns when he came. Celia sang every morning while she baked, her voice clear and light through the open windows. Quinn built her a bench under the tallest tree in the orchard, and each year on their anniversary, he added one new carving to its side: a flower, a bird, a line of music. They never spoke of the footprints again. Whoever had come to the edge of their world had seen enough to turn back. By the time their hair turned silver and their children raised homes of their own nearby, the cabin stood unchanged in spirit, if not in stone. The hearth never went cold. The table never sat empty, and every season from frost to bloom they walked the orchard hand in hand, with nothing behind them left undone.